Hi everyone, welcome to our review of the salient provisions of Republic Act 9298. The short title of RA 9298 is actually the Philippine Accountancy Act of 2004. And so allow me to make my first disclaimer that whatever provisions we're going to review in the next few minutes and the next few slides are only applicable in the Philippines, as this is sourced from the main Republic Act that governs the accountancy profession in the Philippines. Also, another disclaimer, in the recent years, there have been initiatives taken to revise certain sections of RA 9298, but as of date of record, these initiatives and these revisions have not yet seen the light of day. They have not yet been tackled in Congress. And so, for now, the effective or the Republic Act that remains in effect is still RA 9298. So let's go. So the Philippine Accountancy Act of 2004, by virtue of it being of 2004, means that it was made effective in the year 2004. It was precisely, or more particularly, in the presidency of then President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo when this was signed into law, and the specific date of signing this into law was May 13, 2004. So prior to RA 9298, there was PD 692. And PD 692 was signed into law way back then, the presidency of then President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. So from PD 692, PD 692 was then repealed and replaced with RA 9298. Okay, now if we explore the sections of RA 9298, and just like any other discussion that pertains to provisions of laws, there is no substitute for reading the actual law and the actual IRR, or the actual document that contains the IRR. So I am highly recommending that you have a look through these documents. But if we take a look at RA 9298 itself, it's actually relatively short. Talking about the RA, not the IRR, the IRR is lengthier. There are actually five sections or five articles that comprise RA 9298. We have, of course, the opening article, and the opening article is where we will find the short title, okay, and the complete title as well. The opening article also includes the objectives of RA 9298, and we get to notice that RA 9298 encompasses the entirety of your accountancy journey, even as early as the education phase, prescribing, of course, the need for a high level of quality education. Later on, moving into the examination phase, where we, of course, talk about the CPA licensure examinations, and even onwards to the practice of accountancy. All of this is within the ambit and the jurisdiction of RA 9298. It is also in the opening article where we get introduced to the different scopes of practice. Okay, one of the perks of having a license is, of course, having these different sectors, be available for us to explore in our career options. So these different scopes of practice would, of course, involve public practice, which is viewed as where we offer the traditional audit service, and also where CPAs and CPA firms or accounting firms render services to more than one client. We also get to talk about commerce and industry, which now deals with an employer-employee relationship. And of course, for those in education, those which are teaching relevant accounting and other relevant subjects, and of course for those accountants in the government. So one of the things that we get to notice in the RA 9298, when they point out the difference between public practice and commerce and industry, is that public practice normally refers to your relationship with clients. Commerce and industry also refers to your relationships with employers. For those in education, it has to be pointed out that it's not just any subject. It has to be accounting subjects, okay, tax subjects, RFBT subjects, yes. CPAs can teach even law subjects, okay, as part of the curriculum of the BSA program. So mean to say that these subjects have to be relevant to the licensure examinations. For those serving in all of these sectors, particularly for those in commerce and industry and government, then it should be that either the position requires that a CPA should fill in that position, or it requires the skill set that only a certified public accountant may provide. So this is where we get introduced to the different scopes of practice, and all of that happened in the opening article. Now, if we look at Article 2, this is where you will meet the Professional Regulatory Board of Accountancy, which we sometimes shorten to refer to as BOA, or the Board of Accountancy. But the complete name of BOA is actually PRBOA, Professional Regulatory Board of Accountancy. And this group of individuals are very important to us because, yes, they do prepare our licensure examinations. So let's take a look at the composition of PRBOA. So the composition is 7 members with a chair. That means we have a total of 7 people in the board of accountancy. Within the 7, there is already the chairperson. Okay, so 7 members with a chair. So if you could break down the composition of BOA, we have one chair and then six, right? So 1 plus 6 is a total of 7. So within the 6 remaining members of the board of accountancy, they will have to elect one vice chair. Now, as members of BOA, including the chair, they normally have a term, or they have a term, not normally, their term of office is 3 years. Okay, the vice chair, which is elected from amongst the remaining 6 members, will have a term as vice chair of 1 year. It does not mean that after the lapse of 1 year, this particular member will have to be removed from the Board of Accountancy. No, rather, this particular member will simply step down from their position as vice chair and then revert to the member role. Okay, so when you talk about the term of office of 1 year of the vice chair, that is only 1 year term as a vice chair. But if you talk about their term of office as a member of BOA, it's still 3 years. So if you can imagine one full term of 3 years, then it is possible within the PR BOA, there will be three different vice chairs, right? Because the vice chair only sits as vice chair for a year. So, nonetheless, moving on to that, let's now take a look at the qualifications who are qualified to be members of the Board of Accountancy. So, in case you are interested to become a member of the BOA in the future, here are the things that you must be able to tick off. So, first, any member of the Board of Accountancy must be a natural born citizen and resident of the Philippines. Please do take note of the requirement that they must be natural born. Okay, and they must be residents of the Philippines as well. You need to have at least 10 years experience, and take note of this one. 10 years is the minimum. So at least 10 years experience in any scope of practice. So this particular qualification does not favor one sector over the other, as it simply requires a minimum of 10 years experience in any scope of practice. Okay, so whoever will be appointed to the Board of Accountancy must, of course, exhibit good moral character, and they must not have any pecuniary interest in any school or educational institution or review center that offers the accountancy program or accounting review classes. Okay. Lastly, whoever will be appointed to the Board of Accountancy must not be an APO director. What is APO? It's your accredited professional organization. So this is currently in the Philippines. This is our PICPA, or the Philippine Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Do take note that PICPA is the accredited and integrated, so it's now AIPO actually, accredited and integrated professional organization of CPAs in the country. So if you're able to meet all of these qualifications, then that means you are qualified to sit as a member of the Board of Accountancy. The next question now is, how do you get appointed to the PR BOA? Okay, so here's the process. So the AIPO, or in our case PICPA, will submit 5 nominees to the Professional Regulation Commission, and the Professional Regulation Commission, out of the 5, will choose 3, and then this will be presented to the president, to the president of the Philippines, and it will now be the president of the Philippines who will select the one. So for every vacant position, it will follow this process should it need to be filled out. So 5 from PICPA, 3 from PRC. So out of the 5 from PICPA, PRC will select 3, and from the 3, this will be given to the President of the Philippines for the President to select the 1. So that means to say all of the members of the PRBOA are actually presidential appointees. And it's very important for us to highlight that one because whoever appoints also has the power to remove. So, should there be a need to remove any member of the Board of Accountancy, it will be the President of the Philippines who has the authority to do that. Okay, so what is the term of office? We've actually mentioned this one a while back. The term of office is 3 years, renewable for another term, provided that there should be a 1 year resting period after 2 complete terms. So, assuming that person A has been appointed to the Board of Accountancy and has served for 3 years already, which meaning to say 1 term, person A can still be reappointed for another 3 years. It will be the second term. But after 2 complete terms, person A must take a 1 year resting period. Okay, so we are also reminded by Article 2 that the filling up of an unexpired term is not considered as a complete term. So, say for example, we have person A who was appointed to be a member of the Board of Accountancy. The term of office, of course, is 3 years. But after 1 year, person A stepped down due to personal reasons. That means there is an unexpired term of 2 years. So, assuming person B gets appointed to fill out the unexpired term, so person B's service of 2 years, which came from person A's unexpired term, is not counted as a complete term. So let's take a look at the illustration of person B. So person B was appointed, he filled out the 2 years unexpired term of person A. He may still be reappointed for another 3 years, which is 1 complete term. So notice person B has now served for a total of 5 years, right? 2 years coming from person A's term, and then the 3 years coming from person B's own term. The question is, can he be reappointed for another term? The answer is yes, because when we count the resting period only comes into play after 2 complete terms. In the case of person B, the first 2 years is not considered as a complete term. So if you imagine, it is possible for a person to serve the Board of Accountancy for straight 8 years, right? Just like person B, because he first served 2 years coming from person A, and then 3 years from his first complete term, another 3 years from his second complete term. So that makes it a total of 8 years straight before person B takes a 1 year resting period. So ideally, after 2 complete terms or 6 years, it will be a 1 year resting period. But should the member be filling up an unexpired portion, the unexpired portion is not considered as a complete term. So the key to remember is the 1 year resting period only happens after 2 complete terms. Okay. There is also a requirement in Article 2 regards the maximum number of years that a person may serve the Board of Accountancy, and therefore there's a provision there that no person shall serve the Board of Accountancy for more than 12 years. So the counting of the maximum is number of years, not number of terms. Okay? So that is in Article 2. So to re-illustrate, so this is what happens to complete terms. Okay, but then since no person shall serve for a maximum or for more than 12 years, so this is already totaling 12 years, so this person must step down from the PR BOA. Similarly, if the person fills out an unexpired portion, I didn't realize I had an illustration here ready, I'm so sorry. So then still, after 12 years of serving the PR BOA, this person must step down. Okay, so this is all of these exciting discussions is what we will find in Article 2, where we get to meet the Professional Regulatory Board of Accountancy. Okay, so what about the removal? We did mention that the only person who has the authority or the only office that has the authority to officially remove a member of the PR BOA is The President of the Philippines, the Office of the President. But then what are the grounds for removing a member of the Board of Accountancy? Well, if they have been found guilty of neglect of duty. Okay, so they allowed themselves to be appointed as BOA, but they didn't actually work as members of BOA. So neglect of duty would be a ground for removal, or if they have been convicted, take note that conviction is necessary. If they have been convicted of crimes involving moral turpitude, or if they had been found guilty of violating or tolerating violations. Can you imagine the gravity of that? They don't necessarily have to be the one guilty of violation, but if they are found to be guilty of tolerating a violation of RA 9298 and its implementing rules and regulations, they may also be removed from PR BOA. And of course, because the inviolability of the examinations is of paramount importance, it's very important that our SIPALE is credible. If members of BOA have been found guilty of rigging or manipulating the examinations, including being guilty of leaking the examination questions, then it is a ground for removal from PR BOA. Okay, so that's all about the Professional Regulatory Board of Accountancy. Let's now move on to Article 3, and Article 3 is where we will meet you, our future CPA examinees. Article 3 talks about the examination, the registration, and the licensure. So, who are qualified to take the CPA licensure exams? Perhaps it's time for you to take out your checklist and see if you qualify. You must be a Filipino citizen. Do take note that there is no requirement for the examinee to be natural born. Okay, the requirement for one to be natural born is only true if you wish to be appointed as a member of the Board of Accountancy. But for simply taking the SIPALE or the CPA licensure exams, you only need to be a Filipino citizen. Okay, so the examinee must also have good moral character and must be a graduate of the degree program Bachelor of Science in Accountancy. So those who are not BSA graduates cannot take the licensure examinations or the CPA licensure examinations. Okay, now we do have certain cases where they graduated from the earlier versions of the degree program, which is, for example, Bachelor of Science in Commerce, major in accounting. So they are no longer allowed to take the licensure examinations now, but we will be talking about that in more detail once we reach the penal and final provisions. Okay. But for now, it is important that when you present your TOR and your diploma, it should state there that you are a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Accountancy, and also must not be convicted of crimes involving moral turpitude. Take note once again that conviction is necessary. So if, for example, upon filing with the PRC, there was still a case being filed against the examinee, so the examinee may still take the exam as there was no conviction yet. But the moment that the conviction is being handed down, then the license will have to be revoked. Okay, so conviction is necessary as for when you talk about disqualifications. Okay, so must not be convicted of crimes. What is the scope of the examination? You know this one very well. So currently, these are our six board examination subjects. You have advanced financial accounting and reporting. You have auditing, of course. You have financial accounting and reporting, management services, regulatory framework for business transactions, and taxation. So these are our current six subjects. But as we have pointed out, the members of the BOA are actually looking into changing the subjects in the licensure examination. So let's make sure to be able to snatch the title before BOA changes the board exam subjects. All right. Okay, let's talk about the ratings in order to get a passed rating. So you'll only be able to see three possible ratings no, when the results are released, either passed, failed, or conditioned. So in order to get a passed rating, the examinee must be able to get an average of 75% with no grade lower than 65%. Okay, so should the examinee not be able to get that general average, and or should the examinee have a rating below 65% in any subject, then the examinee will be given either a failed rating or a conditioned rating, which we will discuss in the next slide. Okay, but for now, let us know that the results must be released within 10 calendar days after the examination. Note it is calendar days. Okay, so 10 calendar days after the date of the last examination. So when the examinee is given a conditioned rating, the examinee must take a removal exam within 2 years. Now, there are provisions in RA 9298, particularly in Article 3, where if an examinee has failed in two complete examinations, take note that it is very clear, two complete examinations, then the examinee must first take a refresher course of 24 units, and this refresher course must be enrolled from an accredited higher educational institution. That means to say that not just any school can offer a refresher program, that particular school must be accredited. So the refresher course must be completed from an accredited HEI, and this shall be comprised of 24 units. Now, upon completion of the refresher course, the student or the examinee will be given a certificate of completion and a transcript of record, and the transcript of record and the certificate of completion, mind you, only has a validity of 2 years. Now, this one right here is a new proclamation from the Board of Accountancy. This is not actually included in RA 9298, but there was a BOA resolution for this one to the effect that the refresher certificate or the certificate of completion and the TOR is only valid for 2 years. That means to say, should an examinee take the board exams and unfortunately fail, the examinee may take the licensure exams again a second time. But if after the second time the examinee has still failed, the examinee will now be required to take a refresher program. So the refresher program or refresher course will issue the examinee a TOR, and the TOR is what will be filed in the PRC, but the TOR is only valid for 2 years. If the examinee, after completing the refresher course, has not taken the exam within 2 years, that means the TOR has expired. That means that the examinee will have to re-enroll in the refresher program. Okay, so validity of the TOR is 2 years. This requirement or this provision is not present in RA 9298. However, this was passed through a BOA resolution. Take note as well that in the case of conditioned examinees, the taking of the first exam and the removal exam. Okay, so the taking of the first exam and the removal exam together, they will be counted as one exam. Say, for example, we have examinee C. Examinee C took the licensure exams, however, only got a conditioned rating. Remember, within 2 years, examinee C must remove the subjects where they were given a conditioned rating for. So, within 2 years, examinee C removed the subjects, and if unfortunately still didn't make it, so the first exam, the conditioned exam, and the removal exam is counted only as one exam. So, the question is, examinee C took the exam, got a conditioned rating, removed the conditioned subjects, unfortunately still failed. The question is the examinee required to take a refresher program? The answer is no, because to take a refresher program, it has to be two complete exams. In the case of examinee C, that is still one complete exam pa, right? So then examinee C will take another exam, and supposing gets a conditioned rating, takes the removal exam within 2 years' time, and should unfortunately fail, that means examinee C now has two complete failed exams. That is the time that examinee C will now enroll in a refresher course. Once the refresher course is completed, the validity of the TOR is only good for 2 years. Okay, we do have to remember these things as while there are we have seen that there are a few questions from RA 9298 asked in the actual licensure exams, but these are actually very important for us in understanding, particularly in um, determining the ratings. Okay. Now, should an examinee file, okay, with the PRC and pass the licensure examinations, do you know that the PRC may refuse to issue the license to a successful examinee? So simply passing the examinations does not automatically mean that you could already get the license, because there are grounds for refusal to issue the license. And even when the license has already been issued, there are also grounds for suspension of the license or even revocation of the license. So, what are these grounds? Let's remember it by the mnemonic ICU. Okay, so immoral or dishonorable conduct, crimes involving moral turpitude, again, this will require conviction, and the presence of an unsound mind. That is why now more than ever, it is really very important for us to take care of our mental health. Okay, so in cases of ICU, immoral, dishonorable conduct, conviction of crimes involving moral turpitude, and unsound mind, the PRC may either refuse to give you your license or may suspend and even revoke your license. Needless to say, the causes for revocation would mean that the reason is more intense than one which is subjected to suspension, right? But do take note also that revocation is actually not final. Okay, there is a provision in Article 3 whereby a revoked license may be reinstated within 2 years after revocation, but this is not automatic. The members of the Board of Accountancy will have to investigate if the reason for the revocation is no longer present. Okay, it is also within the discretion of the Board of Accountancy if they will require the the CPA with a revoked license to take the exams again or not. So this will be at the discretion of the PR BOA. Okay, but what's important to know is that even when the license is revoked, it may be reinstated within 2 years after revocation. Okay. Now, what happens to the successful examinee? The successful examinee, of course, will be very happy and will celebrate. The newly minted CPA will, of course, celebrate and will have to take their oath. Okay. So this is one of the things we look forward to, right? Our oath-taking ceremony. They will also be issued the certificate of registration. Now, you can liken your certificate of registration to that of like the birth certificate of you being a certified public accountant, right? So this is proof of birth of your license or of your profession. So that being said, the certificate of registration does not expire. Just like how your birth certificate does not expire, right? The COR, the certificate of registration, also does not expire. It remains in full force unless revoked or suspended. Okay, and the successful examinee will, of course, also be given their PRC ID. Okay, so this is all, these are all found in Article 3. So now let's try to practice determining the rating to be given to the examinee. So here we have examinees A to J, and let's assume these are all hypothetical ratings for each of the six board subjects. I have also taken the liberty of computing the average. So let's now illustrate what the members of the BOA will do when they decide on the rating to be given. Let's say, for example, taking a look at examinee A. Examine A has an average rating of 81.83%, which I must say is a relatively high rating, right? So, based on the requirement for the average, it would seem like Examine A has a chance of passing the licensure exams. But remember, we said general average of at least 75% with no grade lower than 65%. So, it is not enough for us to simply compute the average. We have to inspect the individual grades. And once we do that for Examinee A, we would be heartbroken to find out that Examinee A actually has a rating of 64% under management services. Now, the requirement is average of 75, no grade lower than 65. 64 is definitely lower than 65, and that has effectively taken the past rating out of reach for examinee A. Okay. However, we can't say yet that examinee A has failed, right? There's still a chance for examinee A to get a conditioned rating. How will we know if the examinee has a conditioned rating? So the examinee is given a conditioned rating if the examinee is able to score at least 75%. At least 75%, that means 75 and above. At least 75% in at least four subjects. So now we ditch the average and we explore or we investigate or we examine each of the subjects and hope that at least four got 75. Okay, FAR is 90, so definitely that's 75 and above. A FAR is 92, definitely 75 and above. Audit is 85, yes, definitely 75 and above. MS is not 75 and above. Tax is only 70, so not 75 and above. But thankfully, RFBT is 90. Therefore, in the case of examinee A, we will be giving this examinee a conditioned rating. Examinee A must remove MS and tax within 2 years. Okay, from the last examination. Let's now take a look at examinee B. Examinee B has an average of 73.83%. So right off the bat, examinee B cannot be given a passed rating because the requirement is average of 75. And so therefore, since examinee B cannot be given a passed rating, we now check if examinee B will qualify for a conditioned rating. So we have FAR, that's 80, so check. A FAR 75, so that's the second subject, that's 75 and above. Audit is 88, so that's the third subject. MS is 70, so it's not counted. Tax is 65, not counted as well. RFBT is also 65. Remember, to get a conditioned rating, the examinee must have at least four subjects with a score of 75 and above. So in this case, we cannot give examinee B a conditioned rating because only three subjects are 75 and above. And so therefore, unfortunately, examinee B has failed the examination. Let's take a look at examinee C. Examinee C has an average of 78.33. That's above the requirement of 75. Let's now check if examinee C has no grade below 65, and thankfully the FAR grade of examinee C is just about right. It's 65. It's not below 65, it's 65. And so therefore we have our first examinee that is given or to be given a passed rating. So, yay, congratulations, examinee C. All right, let's now take a look at examinee D. And examinee D is performing quite well in terms of the average. That's 83%. But when we inspect the individual scores, unfortunately, FAR has a rating of 64. So, we cannot give examinee D a passed rating. The best we can hope for is that maybe this examinee will qualify for conditions. So let's take a look at the subjects that have 75 and above. We have a FAR, we have MS, we have tax, only three. But then relatively the average is high, right? If you compare the average of all the examinees in this illustration, examinee D had the highest average at 83. If only FAR was 65, examinee D would have passed the licensure exams already. But because FAR is 64, we had to inspect the individual subjects. And from here, we will get to notice there are only three subjects that had a rating of 75 and above. So unfortunately, examinee D will be given a failed rating. Now, this somehow puts things into perspective, right? How you should not, I mean, I understand we all have favorites when it comes to our subjects, but we should not leave a subject unattended. Do not leave your valuables unattended. We should at least make sure that all of the subjects are well prepared for. Because take a look at examinee D, 98 for MS, 97 for tax, 95 for a FAR, but only because FAR is 64 is not even given a pass, not even given a condition rating, right? Because only three are 75 and above. And this also puts into perspective that not all people who fail the licensure examinations, actually, not all of them means that they didn't do well, right? Because, I mean, come on, take a look at examinee D. Examinee D is doing quite well. just except for, one subject that's below 65. So I hope this gives you, a fresh pair of eyes when you look at people who didn't make it in the licensure exams. It doesn't mean that they are not competent. I mean, technically, it's just that, this is things like this happen, right? So just one subject was able to pull this down. So anyway, examine D, better luck next time. Please do try to take the exam again. Let's take a look at examinee E. Examinee E is the type of examinee who says, whatever is required, that is what I will give, no more, no less. The requirement is 75, no grade lower than 65, and examinee E has maintained a 75 rating for all subjects. Congratulations, examinee E, for passing the licensure exams. If you take a look at examinee F, take a look at examinee F, must have read a bootleg version of RE 9298, or must have read a pirated version of RA 9298, because examinee F maintained a 74 rating. Okay, so missed out the part where it has to be 75. So examinee F cannot be given a passed rating. May examinee F be given a conditioned rating? The answer also is no, right? Because for conditioned, it must be 75 and above for at least four subjects. So unfortunately, examinee F, that will be a failed rating. Okay. Examinee G was able to get an average of exactly 75. By the way, the Board of Accountancy does not round up. Okay, so if the rating is 74.83, that is still not considered passed because BOA does not round up. It has to be 75 and above. So in the case of examinee G, the average is 75. Unfortunately, auditing is 64. So cannot be given a passed rating. So let's try to count the number of subjects that have 75 and above. We have AFAR, we have MS, and we have tax. So unfortunately, for examinee G, still not a passed rating. Okay, let's take a look at H and H2. Actually, H and H2 are the same person. We will notice that when examinee H first took the exams, examinee H got a conditioned rating because the average is 78.5, yes, but taxation is 64. So when we counted the number of subjects that are 75 and above, we have FAR, we have AFAR, we have audit, we have MS. So thankfully, examinee H, the first time examinee H took the exam, is given a conditioned rating. Examinee H will now remove tax and RFBT, right? These are the two subjects that are below 75. So this is how it's going to look like when a removal exam is taken. So let's say, for example, when examinee H removed tax and RFBT, unfortunately, in this illustration, the tax rating got even lower from 64. It is now 53. The RFBT rating was maintained at 70. So what will the Board of Accountancy do? The Board of Accountancy will recompute the average, substituting the results of the removal exam to the original, or to the, yeah, to the results of the first exam. So they will still compute the average 90 plus 82, 84, 81. Those all come from the first exam, and then plus 53 plus 70, then compute the average. So in this case, unfortunately, even when the average is still above 75, it's 76.67, but there is still a grade below 65, and in this case it is still taxation. So examinee H will now be given a failed rating. Okay, so after removing, unfortunately, still did not meet the 75, no grade lower than 65 requirement. So examinee H is given a final failed rating. Okay, for this exam. Now, examinee I got an average of 75.5, but FAR is below 65. So let's try to check if this examinee will qualify as a conditioned examinee. 77 of FAR, 72 audit, no, because it has to be 75 and above, right? So a FAR, MS, tax, and RFBT. So this examinee will be given a conditioned rating, will have to retake FAR and audit, right? Lastly, examine J 75.83, but still FAR is 64, so cannot be given a past rating. Let's hope conditioned. FAR 77 1, Audit 82 2, MS 77 3, Tax 78 4, and RFBT 77 5. That means to say that examinee H will only be removing FAR. And actually, examinee J rather, examinee J will only come back to remove the subject far. This is actually a real case. This was the rating of one of my former students. The only subject that needed to be retaken was far. Can you imagine what would have happened if far was 65? This examinee would have already gotten the license, right? But just because of far, just because it it has to be at least 65. So by virtue of that 1 percentage point, so thus the examinee had to remove the subject far. But thankfully, the examinee was able to pass. No? So this examinee is already a CPA now. So this is how you will determine, or how BOA will determine passed, failed, or conditioned. To get a passed rating, you need to have an average of at least 75 with no grade below 65%. To get a conditioned rating, then you must have at least four subjects with at least 75%. Otherwise, the examinee will be given a failed rating. All right, so that is what we'll find in Article 3. Let's now proceed to Article 4. And Article 4 is where we will see the practice of accountancy, particularly paying particular importance, of course, to public practice. Okay, so in terms of public practice, the structure may either be a single practitioner, a firm, or a partnership. The partnership may either be a general professional partnership or a limited liability partnership, but suffice it to know that a corporation structure is not allowed in the current RA 9298. Okay. In terms of the name, so these CPAs and firms are not allowed to indicate any specialization, no fictitious names. It should not be misleading as to the type of organization. Now, what about in terms of the change in name? So, in case this is a change in name from partnership to partnership, there's essentially no restriction. Okay, but if there is a change in name coming from or owing to a change in structure from partnership to sole proprietorship, say for example, you have A and B firm or A and B partnership, B decided to leave the partnership, and so A is now continuing it as a single practitioner or as a sole proprietorship. So there has to be a change in name, and this change in name must be effected within 2 years. So RA 9298 has prescribed to us the moving on period. You are given 2 years to change the name. Because remember, part of the requirements for the name is that it must not be misleading as to the type of organization. So if it's from partnership to partnership, not a problem. But if it's partnership to sole, there has to be a name change within 2 years. Okay? Also, I think you know this one, that those who are practicing the profession under public practice must be accredited. And in order to secure the accreditation, among other requirements, the partner or the CPA must have 3 years meaningful experience and must have garnered 120 or earned rather 120 CPD units. Also, please take note that currently within the four sectors, there are only two sectors that are required for accreditation. The first one is public practice, and the second one is for those who are in the academe. So your teachers need to be accredited. So these are the two sectors or scopes of practice that require accreditation. Okay. And of course, a CPA must use a seal, and our RA 9298 has prescribed the seal. It must be circular with a smaller circle and a bigger circle. On the upper half will be the name of the CPA. On the lower half will be the CPA registration number. And in the middle of the small circle must be the letters CPA. And yes, that design is prescribed in RA 9298. Article 4 also talks about foreign reciprocity and the difference between foreign reciprocity and special permits. So if you talk about foreign reciprocity, just, it works on the premise that I scratch your back, you scratch mine. If they acknowledge our CPAs as CPAs in that country without need to take any further examination or licensing, then we will also recognize their CPAs as CPAs in our country. So reciprocity. Okay, but reciprocity has to be evidenced by a law. It's not, it is not, it does not work by request or by simply writing a letter. No, reciprocity has to be effected in the form of a law. Because remember that when you talk about reciprocity, you are accepting the license of another country in full. So that's reciprocity. As opposed to special permits would mean that yes, we allow them to do limited practice in the country and it is specified what for. Normally, we will accept these foreign CPAs under special permits when they are seen to be essential for the development of accountancy in the Philippines and if there are no Filipinos that can do the job. Okay, so special permits would mean that they are allowed but only for specific purposes which are indicated in the said permits. All right. So finally, we go to Article 5, where we'll find the penal and final provisions. This talks about the penalties in case of violation of RA 9298 and its IRR, implementing rules and regulations. There is a fine of 50,000 or more. Take note that what is provided is the floor fine, 50,000. It is not, the ceiling is not defined. So it's 50,000 or more. Okay, but in terms of the imprisonment, it could be imprisonment of 2 years or less. So maximum imprisonment period is 2 years or less, or it could be both. Okay. Also in Article 5, we will find, do you remember a while back we mentioned only those graduates of the BSA program are allowed to take the licensure exams? Supposing there are graduates of BSc major in accounting, they were only given up to May 2006 to take the licensure exams. So imagine May 2006 as kind of like the portal. So if they're able to step into the portal, if they're able to take the May 2006 licensure exams, assuming that they failed, they can still take another exam. Assuming they failed in two complete exams, they can still take a refresher exam and then take another exam and another exam for as long as they have taken the May 2006 exam on or before the May 2006 exam. But should the graduates of BSc major in accounting not have taken the May 2006, they were not able to enter the portal, they will no longer be allowed to take the exams now unless they re-enroll in the BSA program and graduate with the BSA degree. Okay, so for those who were able to make it to the May 2006 portal, they may still take now, provided they were able to enter the portal. They were able to take the May 2006. But if they were not able to take at all, unfortunately, at this time, they are not allowed anymore. Okay, so these are just the salient provisions of RA 9298. Of course, there are other provisions present, particularly found in the IRR, such as, for example, the presence of your standard setting bodies. You have AASC, okay, Auditing and Assurance Standards Council. You have FSRSC. That's, of course, your standard setting body for accounting standards. The presence, of course, of ETC as well, or the Educational Technical Council, the QRC, the Quality Review Committee, among other bodies created by RA 9298, as well as provisions for CPD or continuing professional development. So, right now, we are reminded that should we wish to renew our ID, if the purpose is only to renew our professional ID or PRC ID, what is required is only 15 CPD units, okay, over the course of 3 years because the ID is good for 3 years. So you will need to submit proof to the PRC that you have earned 15 CPD units. But if you're talking about accreditation, and remember, accreditation is only required for those in public practice and the academe. If you're aiming for accreditation, what is required is 120 CPD units within a period of 3 years. So ID renewal only 15. 15, but for accreditation, 120 CPD units. All right. And that's about it. That's our review for the salient provisions of RA 9298. I think we are now ready to move on to the multiple choice questions. So once you're ready, I'll see you on the videos for the multiple choice questions.